Because I have heard also from Karthik Muralidharan, who works with who has worked a lot in education sector, who has done a lot of studies, econometric studies on how government spends in education and what is its effectiveness. So I was listening to one of his podcast, and he was also saying that there has been a lot of studies on government spending on education, but from now onwards there should be a focus on a type of school instruction and pedagogy, what kind of pedagogy is more useful and impactful. So I think because I also think there is a lot of variety of pedagogy structures to choose from, and I think they have a lot of benefits. I mean, different structures have different kind of benefits, different kind of shortfalls. So we can talk about like what kind of pedagogy mixture maybe can be more useful to implement at the school level. So when I say school level, I mean primary, secondary, till 10th, 12th, whatever we can segregate when we are talking about it. So like by pedagogy, I mean like there can be a lot of types of pedagogy like exposure based. So I think the pedagogy of ISPP, public policy program that we underwent, has a lot of focus on exposure, and they invite a lot of people, a lot of guests to talk on different issues, and so I have found that very useful. And I was also reading, I think some guest also talked about it during one of the lectures in ISPP, that when you, I think it was econometrics class, that when you, there has been studies on econometric studies on uh, what type of what is school makes a difference in the learning outcomes or educational outcomes or the outcomes related to success in education and other fields. So what is the role of institution, type of institution? Like in America, here the public institutions are more reputed. They have IITs and IITs. These are more reputed. But in USA, private universities are more reputed than public universities. So there were studies that to find a difference, like what is the role of public university versus private university in the educational outcomes of their students. And so this was a causal inference. So in the causal inference, they found that almost it almost don't these things don't have any impact really on the learning outcomes. The slight difference that they found, they attributed it to these kind of pedagogy, like exposure based pedagogy, that in reputed colleges there is a lot of exposure to different kinds of thoughts, different kind of people, and that really impact their students. So that is the difference that they found. So I think this is important. I mean, it's a very important pedagogy style, exposure based. But there can be other types of pedagogy, like play based, practical learning based pedagogy. There can be classroom instruction, memorization based pedagogy. That is usually currently that is the case in most of the schools in India. And then there can be pedagogy based on learning styles or learning preferences of students, and then simulation based pedagogy, like game based. Like if you're teaching about politics, then maybe create a politics like environment, maybe create an simulation of an election. Some children stand up for the election, others vote for them. So the simulation kind of pedagogy can be one of the choice. Then peer learning based or community based pedagogy. So I have a friend who studies in NID Ahmedabad, and she was talking about when she joined NID Ahmedabad. She was talking about this is the kind of best pedagogy style she has encountered or experienced. Like she said that there is a lot of focus on peer-based learning. Teachers don't teach much; they just introduce you to topics, and you have to form groups and teach each other on those topics in detail. So I think based learning is one of the learning style that can be quite useful. And then we can also talk about that individualized based learning, like tuitions. So we can say that maybe school doesn't work at all. Maybe everyone should be taught individually by tuition like structure, a personal focused based structure. So this can be also one alternative to all the pedagogy structures. So I think we must have a preference, like an opinion, like what kind of pedagogy style works best. So I just wanted to initially ask you first that what is your opinion, like what do you think works best in a school till first class to 10th or maybe 12th? You can talk about it. So I wanted to start with Rahul. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so when we were in school, I guess I studied from a convent type of school. But the major difference that I was noticing what others government school were there, because it was more of a rote learning over there. Whereas my school system was based more on experimental kind of pedagogy. And you can say the one which you talked about, that different people are coming there, sharing their experience. This was one that I had been noticing when I say that experiment based. So we had this, for example, if we are learning some science, so it's not about what science formula is this, or what is the, just learn the formula. So go to the labs. This is the compound. Once you mix here, this is an impurity. So by doing some kind of experiments, that is how the learning was preferred in our school system over there. But this was not a universal kind of system that was followed. So I think it's very important that experiment based learning has to be part of the pedagogy of the current system, because if you see, we talk a lot about world moving towards AI, world moving towards skill based. So how are the skills acquired? So skills are acquired once you embark on the journey that this is how your learning should be. Once you are, because if you take sports, so sports are not something that you can teach something as theoretical. So I guess this idea that how you have to perform on the field, if from the very core elements are being taught in the same way. For example, if someone has to be a scientist or someone has to be an economist, so why not just introducing some kind of experiments with coins or money that is being taught? This is the this is the transaction that is being taken. So, like very on the positive side, that experiment-based pedagogy should be part, and I am on the side that it has to be a very core element of how the pedagogy system should be defined.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of point. I think we talked about skill-based learning, and I think the government focuses on a lot on vocational education. And especially with the new education policy, there is a lot of focus on vocational studies, skill-based learning, skills acquiring. But I know I have heard also, I have read at other places that there is a lot of criticism of vocational based studying or skills based studying, that in a lot in if you talk about history journey of public education. So in England and other places, vocational studies were more focused for the working class because they wanted them to learn skills and do the jobs that the other thinkers, the people from the upper class, who they what the job, the kind of job they will not do. So they wanted them to learn those skills and get employed in those kind of jobs. But so that's why there was a criticism that theoretical based learning and basic education, higher education should also be available for the working class. But I also get your point that what you are saying, that sports cannot be taught theoretically. Sports cannot be taught through books. So I think what you were saying, that there is different subjects have a different, styles that they need to be taught through those styles to be effective, impart effective learning. So I agree on that. I think, Jose, what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I also agree with both of your points, and I have looking into my education, I also have learned through this what you said, reinforcement, repetition, and reward system, like the rote learning. So that was the dominant approach was there in the pedagogy when I was a student. But I also so there was a huge ecosystem apart from the schools. There was something called the Shastra Sahitya Parishad in Kerala, a huge organization which is working to develop the scientific timbre of students. So apart from classrooms, on Saturdays and Sundays, we have activities of Parishad. We have competitions. They'll come and they'll teach us experimental learning, how this litmus paper changes its color, what is the meaning of that. That kind of an experiment was there, and every schools, every children used to come. They used to cooperate with that activity, and that kind of an ecosystem for experimental learning was there. So I think apart from integrating it into school curriculum, we can also think about creating an ecosystem for experimental based learning. So that's another way of doing it. And I think it also addresses the criticism that Digvijay raises that, if you are more emphasizing on this vocational learning in education, it may lead to the people who are of poor background going for vocational learning because they need money, then they are desperate about jobs. So it's a shortcut for them to learn that and go to the job market. So that's also kind of caste being reinforced in the society. We know that caste is playing a huge role in Indian society, and it can play a huge role if we are integrating vocational education. But if you're asking me, should we include vocational education? I think yes, we should. But after I would say, I mean, after 10th, that's my take on it. I have my reasons for that. So this is my take on this topic. You can add on to this.
So till after five is like class two, and the three is class five. So after that, they are like introducing some part of vocational training, not the full element. That they understand that currently what important elements of skill set people should be using. For example, there was a phase when data science and all. So they also told that from class 8, they should understand what data science and what artificial intelligence is. So I guess this part that once you are regulating from the up that and emphasizing that one has to include this part in the curriculum. So this also brings some kind of change in the way now the school system and pedagogy will be designed. So yeah, I also agree with Joe's that after 10th is the best time, but yeah, like from 8 they should understand what vocational training is.
Yeah, I think what I get from both of you talking is that we should not switch to like a full learning based, practical learning based model, full vocational model, but there should be element in a gradual fashion. It should be introduced in classes.
Yeah, because what happens is na Digvijay, ki lot of students are just from the rote learning system. They are just mugging up for the examinations time, and
Yeah.
this happens when you can go to some villages or some small town where they don't have tuitions, or like Jose mentioned, the ecosystem is not very developed in that area. So what used to happen is till the student get to real life world, they are just unknown to the factors that they have already learned, but they can't use it because they don't know what's the practical application of that what they have learned. So once you're learning the subject with some experiments, I do not mean to say ki vocational wala learning, but they should understand what they are learning. So from the learner's point of view, not from the teacher's point of view.
What did you say in the last from the learner's point of view, not from the teacher's point of view? I think it introduces us to another theme of the discussion, agency of students in the whole pedagogy system, like how they and what they want to learn. We will talk about that later. But what you guys were saying that especially in rural setting, they do not get chance to any kind of practical learning. So I think that brings us to role of infrastructure in a pedagogy system. So when I talk about infrastructure, so there are kind of infrastructure which enables school pedagogy. So like when we talk about early childhood education or primary education, there could be infrastructure like playrooms, craft corners. There is utter tinkering labs scheme, that is campaign that is being run. I think it is quite successful from what I have heard. I have not analyzed it individually, but from what I have heard. And then there can be, and I think you are talking about this. Data and digital tools. So when someone comes from a non digital environment, adapting to digital environment takes a lot of time. So getting familiarized with the computers and working with computers, it takes a lot of time, and especially people coming from rural backgrounds who do not have exposure to this technical environment. So technical environment is not natural, it is a man-made environment. So you will have to introduce it in such a way that they get familiarized with it, they adapt to it. There is a factor of adaptability to this new environment that has been made by the humans. So I think it will require infrastructure to be there in the school premises for them to get familiarized with that. So I think the infrastructure in a lot of ways plays its role. So what do you guys think about it? Do you think what kind of infrastructure should be there at the primary level, at the secondary level, and upper secondary level that can that is important to induce learning? And I was thinking that there are some kind of infrastructure which also induce or at least give provide children a scope of learning of socially responsible behaviors. Like if you have these like biogas plants in cooling premises, like if you have kitchen garden and if you have things like that, So it will be a way that school itself and the teachers itself are leading socially responsible behaviors through examples, because children at that age learn through examples, through what other their seniors, their teachers, their school is doing. So the school is adopting these socially responsible behaviors. This will also impart the same learning in the children. So I think there also school infrastructure comes play a lot of role. So, do you guys have any opinion on that? We can start with Jose if you want to say something.
Yeah. I mean, I do have opinion. So as you said, having an infrastructure makes a lot of difference, especially the digital infrastructure. So if in primary classes, if not like in middle schools and all, if you have a smart TV and you can teach students a particular subject, if geography, just show it.
Jose,
Hello?
your internet is, think,
It
hello?
fluctuates.
Can you hear me?
Hello?
Yeah. I will switch
Yeah,
to my
yeah,
phone.
it's it was breaking. Your voice is breaking.
Yeah. Hello.
Maybe you can shut down your video for a few minutes.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, guys. Yeah. So what I was saying is that if in like in middle schools and all, I think a smart TV is something that we can explore and we should explore in classes. So, for instance, if you are teaching about geography and you are showing students what that geography looks like what are the different things that we need to look into when we think about that particular geography, it gives them more experiential kind of learning environment. For instance, if you are teaching about Antarctica and you're teaching about snows, and if they're able to see and experience that, it is a modal learning, like they're learning through sounds, visuals. It will easily register in their head, and it makes a lot of difference. And in like higher secondary classes, I think if they have a computer lab and they can go and do things themselves, where the teacher being the facilitator and the person who is directing them rather than directly teaching in particular subjects. Not in all subjects, there are areas where teacher need to guide students, and there are areas where students can explore themselves. So if we can separate our pedagogy like this and curriculum like this, that makes a lot of difference. And as you said, having a biogas plant, having separate waste bins for plastic waste and food waste, that makes I mean creates a practice among students to have a good citizen, to become a good citizen. These are some things that we can start doing in our schools. I think mostly in some states. I've seen it in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, where I studied and I am working now, and Delhi also. I think it's there. So if that kind of an enabling infrastructure is there, it will make a lot of difference.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. Jose, Rahul, you want to add?
Yeah, so I agree with Jose. The point he made on digital infrastructures,
Yes.
so that can be a very added advantage to students who are learning and who want to assess themselves as to what they have learned. And it also helps the teacher in real time monitoring of all the things, what they are teaching. And for example, if in a week they understand what are the drawbacks of their teaching, or they can identify a few students that who are lacking behind in one aspect. So it's a very good tool if you are introducing digital aspect as an infrastructure in the school system. Also, firstly, I would like to touch upon the basic infrastructure that the current system has. See, ASAR report it has shown that normally we are close to having good infrastructures in school. But even if you go to the rural areas, the infrastructure, the building is there, but there are no fans, right? So some of the elements, the basic necessities has to be provided first, because this will enable a growing environment for the student as well as the teacher, because pedagogy here is being delivered by the teacher. So that aspect is very important. Then once that basic infra is properly ready, then you can touch upon the digital aspect, the labs, as Jose mentioned. It's very important to have a separate computer lab so that they understand that what are the elements, because everything you see, even if we today are having a discussion on something, we are using a digital medium. So that's become very necessity in if you want to step out of your house and move around in the world currently. So, and also, like I mentioned, if some infrastructure related to digital can be a part of the ecosystem, it's very important because, like I mentioned, the pedagogy has to be monitored, and that is how you will be able to refine time and again. So, yeah, so these are the 2 points I would like to make here.
Yeah, these all points that you guys spoken about, it makes a lot of sense. And on a school infrastructure, I think I have read this paper. It was by Karthik Mulli Dharan only, I guess. He was analyzing the role of school infrastructure in relation to new education policy. So he talked about like the restrictions. Like now there is no restriction on the access to school because everyone have access. Like there is a school premise, a primary school. I'm talking about primary school. There is a primary school in in every neighborhood, so there is not a problem of access. But because there are so many primary schools, and he found that in each primary school, there is the total number of students are less than 50 in most of these schools. So he talked about like the way forward should be like building this complex type of no school complex type of infrastructure, like a big school, and instead of having these segregated schools, build big school, big complex like infrastructure, so that the building of these kind of digital labs, digital library, or these additional infrastructure can be more feasible. So you cannot build it if there are so many schools. There are 100 schools in one. You cannot build in at every school these digital infrastructures. That will be very very much costly. So if you build like a big complex like a school infrastructure, it will be more feasible. And I think he said that you can bring into transportation system to bring in children from who are from a little far area. So I think that can be one approach. I think that is also limiting building of this infrastructure, the segregation of these schools. And we talked about how infrastructure can what I did acknowledging the fact that in the last discussion on practical based learning, Jose mentioned that there is a campaign that he witnessed in Kerala, that there is a campaign for scientific learning, part scientific learning. And I think I did not I forgot to mention that, but I think that I have not heard about that before. And I
Okay.
think that can be very useful even for developing any kind of attitude.
Yes.
Like it can be socially behavior. You want to develop a socially behavior habits. The campaign like program can be very useful. You want to develop digital literacy, campaign like program can be very useful. So I think that is very we can include it in our pedagogy.
Yeah.
Rahul, you want to say something?
Yeah, so I would like to uh, take you to 2 examples. One is adult tinkering labs. So
Wow.
so these are very useful in having how your pedagogy is structured, because once you're learning something, you get to experiment something, and you have all the support system that is provided by some organizations. So one is this, and second is while I was studying is in VNIT Nagpur. So there were other institutions that were coming up by in different states, such as the government has given a new NIT, has sanctioned a new NIT in Mizoram, but their infrastructure was not developed during that time when that was sanctioned. So what they did was they assigned NIT Nagpur as the you can say the mother institute or the caretaker institute for some time, maybe 3 years was the deadline, was the time. So what happened during this time was the faculty who were recruited that time, the students that time, they were all part of a bigger institute, and they saw from a very close look how the ecosystem is developed over here, how what pedagogies are over here, so what is the culture over here, and similarly they tried to adopt and innovate how it will be in NIT Mizoram. So what happens over here is a cross institution development also happens, and this also helps in developing how your institution system or how your learning is to happen. You take on the other hand the different example. What if there was directly a new institute made, the students were getting new to the institute, the faculties are new over there, so they'll take some time to adapt to newer systems. So that instead, if you have this, immersion kind of programs or institutions who are coming together and developing some program, so why not adopt this also in some school system where the teachers maybe can be part of the other bigger institutions where they learn. Because what happens at times is, once you are in a place or in a position, you don't tend to learn out of the box. But this kind of programs can help, and this is what I have seen that helped a lot of people in their curriculum as well, and in their when they were trying to find new jobs as well.
And I think I remember, if I remember correctly, because I have spent 1 year in NIT Agartala, and if I remember correctly, you mentioned to me that NIT Agartala was also part of NIT Nagpur campus. And I think same thing happened in IMs also. There is a mentor IM and there is a child IM under the mentorship of that old IM. So, and interestingly, I think I have heard of one program very similar to this. It was called a twin schooling program. I think it was in the Delhi school policy somewhere I read, but I think it was never implemented. So the program was like that. The immersion of the connecting one school in urban area to the one school in rural area, and there was the teachers from the rural school, they have to spend some time in the urban school, and teachers from the urban school, they have to spend some time in rural school. There have to be exchanges of learning practices and teaching practices. So I think there was a like a guidance and mentorship kind of program that was developed. I think I was intrigued by it, but I think it never got implemented because I never heard of it anywhere again. That is a very, that's insightful. That can be done. Talking about pedagogy, I think we should now also talk about developing critical thinking and logical thinking in school children, because till now there is a complete absence of it. We are only teaching subject based, topical based knowledge. We are imparting only knowledge and sometimes skills. If we include practical based learning, skills will be imparted. But there is a need to develop a kind of thinking, a kind of critical thinking, for the development of the not only of the children but also of the nation. Because yesterday only I was talking to my father and we were arguing on this subject, that the lack of critical thinking among the masses, it is what that leads to political corruption in somewhat. I mean, it gives space for the political leaders to take advantage of us, and the masses sometimes idolize their leaders and they think that they really care for them. I mean, political leaders first, in the first place, they will think of themselves. They are there because they want to be the political leaders, not because they care of the masses. So that's not their primary motivation. But most of the times, masses think that they are there because for them to take care of them. That is what sometimes lead to fixed majority. Sometimes the majority is developed and it does not change, and then a lot of things happen. Like, I mean, I don't know what you think about it, Rahul, but I think what is happening currently, I mean, it's an example of that. There is a fixed majority and then you can suppress minorities and you can impose a lot of restrictions on free speech and all. So I think critical thinking could have prevented that. So I think the role of critical thinking and logical thinking, we should discuss about it. So do you have an opinion on it, Rahul? How can we do it?
I mean, when you were speaking about that, I was just going through the space. Like, why are people, or like, why are we not more into critical thinking? Or why the current, you can say, generation, or so why are we lacking? So the first thing that came to mind is because we don't invest time in critical thinking, because we are not emphasizing that now let us do some idea or do some ideation on this thing. So what is happening in this very fast paced world is we are just seeing all the reels one after one. Even 4 5 second reel is too big for some people, so that is not giving some space for critical thinking. So I think we talked about, like Jose also talked about, experimental learning. So I guess that is the area which should be connected with critical thinking and logical thinking, because once you start understanding what you are learning, so the reason will lead to logical thinking, and that will how critical thinking will develop. Because you can't just learn something and without understanding you are able to have a critical thing. So reasoning of what you're learning, you'll have to answer the question. So whatever is in the textbook, you write that. But when I was in my college, so there was this professor called as Chatterjee sir. So he used to teach us. So I was a in mechanical engineering. So what he used to do is he used to keep an open book examination.
Oh.
So you come with any notes, you come with a lot of books. So because the idea was critical thinking, logical thinking, and application thinking. So you learn something what is being taught. You go through, even the assignments were such that कि आप 2 दिन ले लो, आप 4 दिन ले लो, but you think on this and then you submit the assignment. People were getting still zero in some of the assignment because they were not able to answer it in a practical way. So this idea was very unique. For the first time, I was when I was looking towards it for the first time, it struck me because this never had happened in my whole life till then. And then I understood that this is important because they want to make you a critical thinker. They want you to answer this question or solve this question from a logical perspective and not from the rote learning perspective, that what is the SOP of an answer, you just write that. So I guess, and that made us a good engineer that time.
Yeah, I agree. Jose, you want to add?
Yeah. I mean, since we are talking about open book exams, I'll start from there. So in ISBP, we used to have open book exams, and in my previous college, like when I was doing masters in international relations in Mahatma Gandhi University, also I had this. So compared to the traditional exams, I felt open books exams are bit more complex because of the fact that we have to read, we have to think, and we have to articulate in a way that it makes sense. Right. So in the other exams, we'll mug up things. We'll by heart things and we'll mug up. And the questions that we have in an open book exam will be also a bit more complex than we have in traditional exam setup. I think like the idea of having an exam is to check whether you have learned it or not. But people often take it in the wrong way. It is to create a kind of a people who are able to pass, who are not able to pass. So it's like a segregating that class of people from the other. So that's not the way that we should approach education. That's what I want to say first. We should be creating an environment where people can learn. It's like we are not segregating people who are learners, who are not learners. Today we have technology, we have information in our fingertips. So it's not that information is not, it's not a lacking thing. It's not a scarcity. Right now we have information overloading. So we need to inculcate critical thinking. And in the last discussion, I think we mentioned about teaching about logical fallacies. When we have a lot of information, we have to cross check what these things are. We can introduce the education of logical fallacies, I think, in middle schools itself. Students can cross check the information they are coming across. I think in Finland it is happening. And we take Finland as an education model where, good things are happening. And we can also include, it's not impossible to include logical fallacy training in schools.
On
Apart
this
from that,
point of logical fallacy,
yeah.
maybe in the classrooms we should run speeches and commentaries of political leaders and to tell that students to analyze like who is creating logical fallacy, whose argument is sound, whose argument is not sound.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. That's experimental learning, experiential learning. I mean, that's a kind of a thing that we need in our curriculums, right? We have a ability to do that, and we should do that. That's my take on it. And apart from that, when we talk about critical thinking, we are, I think, talking about the learner itself. So in traditional education, in behavioralism or cognitive theory of education, we are talking about the process of learning, how we are learning, and in this experimental learning, and when we are talking about critical thinker, what the learner think about what the information that the learner is receiving. So in that part, it's also a very huge shift that we are that we need to bring when we are talking about this critical theories. So right now, many of the people are talking about social constructivism in education, where we give one topic to students. They will sit, they will discuss, they will bring up something, they will collate things, and they will come up with the answers to the questions that we provide them. So it's not a rote learning alone. It's like they are discussing. Ideally, they should discuss, but in classrooms, we are seeing limitations for discussions also. But we need to build curriculum in a way that students should be discussing, or we need to create enabling structures for students to they should be discussing. It can be something like one or two students can present the topic, the other students will be answering. Yeah, it was there during our ISPP class, right? Where Pranab Sen was teaching us. Professor Sen was doing this method, teaching using this method. So
Yeah, well, answer. I was writing the same point and you just spoke about it.
yeah, okay. I mean, that's the way that we can think about disseminating education in classrooms, right? I mean, social constructivism is one way. The other way is like a more radical way, right? Uh, liberational. I mean, there's a liberational theory of education. There's a book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So it talks about like how we are. I mean, how we need to think beyond the things that being fed into us, right? If we want to get real education, if you want, there are a lot of things happening, and our education system and structure is stuck in the past itself. So if we want to get above and beyond, we have to do something else. We should not also wait for the authorities or policymakers to come and give us. Rather than we have a lot of things available on this digital era. We have to rely on that as well. So these are the things that we can include in pedagogy and way to inculcate critical thinking in classroom.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to, I had 2 points to add. First thing, when we talk about, imparting critical thinking and logical thinking, all it comes down to, teacher being aware of that, like how to think critically, how to think logically. If teachers are not available, they cannot do any kind of experimentation, they cannot integrate any kind of critical thinking in their teaching practices. So I think here the problem is maybe the problem is your teacher training. The teacher training is not being done in a way that maybe teachers are not aware how to do that. So I think we should also talk about how to integrate critical thinking and logical thinking as a curriculum in the teacher training programs. And we have heard our education professor in ICP talk about like why teacher training is one of the crucial problem in most of the education related issues. And another thing that while you guys were talking, what I found link that I found was when we articulate our knowledge, kind of already we are already doing a kind of critical thinking when we talk about it, when we try to articulate our understanding. So like maybe like what Vinci used to run the communication class. So if there is something like that, or if the you were talking about presenting your knowledge to the whole class, like what Lada sir and Pranav did. So that kind of exercise can also lead to build some kind of critical thinking and logical thinking in ourselves. And there was another habit that I found that built some kind of critical thinking inside me was journaling. So in our school, we had to do 20 minutes of journaling in the morning before the prayer starts. That exercise used to force me to think. So something, a kind of space that forces you to think, you will, naturally adapt to thinking critically and logically, because your mind is able. It's not that you have to will learn. You have to learn the critical thinking. It's not about memorization. Your mind is able. You just need to force your mind to think. And if there is a space that does that for you, I think it will lead you to, think more critically, logically. So, another thing that I wanted to talk about is that we talked about scientific learning, critical thinking, digital literacy, a lot of those things. But those things comes on the spectrum of analytical thinking or scientific learning. But what I think that our education pedagogy is also lacking, not only in primary education, not only in government-based education, but also no private-based education, is that cultural learning, cultural understanding. There is no focus on literature, Hindi literature, English literature. There is no focus on poems, music. I think these are very important, and especially in the times of AI. I mean, AI will be able to do a lot of analytical, tasks, but these are humanistic skills that AI can still not, do. AI cannot do kind of music that inspire you or that, uh, instill something emotionally inside you. So we need to focus on cultural, developing cultural prosperity, cultural richness among people. So do you guys have anything to add on it? Rahul, do you want to say something?
Cultural, yeah. So I was also part of the UPSC preparation, people who started preparing for UPSC. And so when I was, so there is also a subject what is art and culture, which forms a part of the subjects that we study there. So when we study that art and culture, so it's right from the standard fifth NCRT textbook that we have. So how did the evolution of a man or human being happens, and how so culture means basically the way the people used to live, how they used to live around that time. So the evolution is that. So I understand that that is part of the content that we have. A lot of content right from standard fifth to this, but a lot of that is focused more on how civilizations have come down and how civilizations live till now. What you are talking about is the musical aspect and the new cultural aspect that have been added currently. So yes, I do also feel that from a very base level that should be part, because the one who can pay, who have good earnings, they can learn from outside. But people who cannot afford it should also get uh, understanding of what our music is, how it is developed. So this should also be part of the pedagogy. I agree with you.
I understand that the way that our education system is structured is like what we can teach to students that will lead to some kind of financial outcomes at the end. We teach things. We focus on things that will develop them into we make them more employable. But
Yes.
there should be also focus on self identity. These aspects, these cultural aspects that develop a person, develops the self knowledge of a person, develops them personally, and it leads to self introspection, self knowledge.
Yes.
So these things are also important, and there used to be. I agree that there is a lot of content. I mean, there were classes, musical classes, and dance classes, craft classes, art classes in our schools too. But it was like extracurricular activities. Nobody was interested in that. I remember that I was selected for people. Nobody was voluntarily getting selecting these courses on their own. So in my school, the teachers who were responsible for these subjects, they used to forcefully take students under their class. That even if the students do not want to, because nobody was going into their classes, they had to forcefully, assign students to these classes. And I was selected for dance classes, and I was, embarrassed kind of that I do not want to do dance because it's embarrassing. I made my father write a letter to the teacher and got shifted myself to art classes so that I can just waste the class timing. So, I mean, I think it should be there. What do you think, Jose?
Yeah, I mean, wonderfully articulated, Rahul and Vijay. I also, I mean, very much agree to your points. Actually, like, there is a circle of decolonizing our entire education system that is happening in global south. And in India also, I've seen this happening. Like in my previous university also, where I've studied MA International Relations, we had this decolonizing the education system, the theories and all. And as the Vijay pointed out, we are trained to be workers, right? That is the ultimate end of our education, like mostly. And if you're looking into the top companies in the world, like there are in from India, I think government-owned companies are there, but people building that, people creating things is very less, right? So we need to identify where the problem lies, our strength and weaknesses, and come up with that. We need to give away the thinking that we are getting educated to be the employees of someone. We need to create our own. For that, cultural education and understanding where the education system come from, what are the problems and challenges that the education system brings, and what is the need of the people that are surrounding us and the country needs. These are the things that we can ask ourselves and find answers to. Also, when we think about culture, it's also like a it's also an interesting debate. Like, so we were talking about logical thinking. So if somebody is telling that you should go to temple, and if we are logically asking the person like why, like if you are interrogating the person multiple times, the person may not have answer, logical answer. But if you're interrogating it, we will have a cultural answer. Like culturally, because of this happened, because of this temples were created, because of this the people are going to temple. So there will be a reason culturally associated with the changes that happened. So through cultural education, we can understand our the social structure, the biases we have, the things that we should not do, the things that we can do better. I mean, that will be a better thinking that we will be developing if we are focusing on culture. So I'm deviating from what Vijay asked, like literature, music. So these are some of the important things that we need to include because we should not lose that human thing. Like everything is information is everywhere, but we need to sometimes enjoy. At the end of the day, what we make money for is to have a happy life. Nobody wants suffering unless that suffering makes them happy. That's my thinking. So, I mean, there,
Realistic suffering.
yeah,
Yeah, I no, I remember on our debate on working class versus upper class because it came to mind that in schools in expensive schools where rich people kids go, they do have a lot of focus on these cultural based
yes, yes,
classes, music, dance, literature. They have a lot of focus on that as much as they have on education, other education. But
yeah,
in the medium class schools where the medium class children go, they treat that as extracurricular activity. So there is a divide, class and
yes, yes,
working class divide on this aspect. And what you said about social biases and teaching on inequality and all, I think it is not anywhere, not even in private schools, expensive private schools and budget schools. It's definitely not there. So it need to be there.
yes,
I think now I want to move towards aspects of motivation. So I think motivation is the very crucial, is at the center of any educational outcome and education related success that we defined. The primary way, the very usual way people and teachers and schools and the whole education system try to build a motivation among children is by creating a competitive environment. The teachers will compare you. Teachers, there is a assessment. Our assessment is designed in such a way to compare, to rank children on a spectrum, and then pick the shortlist the best students and then give them access to higher education and better education. So the way motivation is designed is through competitive uh, environment. It has its soft faults because when it happened with me. That it can take a lot of firms when you are not very competitive. When you are in a competitive environment, but you are not able to perform, then you automatically lose motivation for. Only motivation is to be competitive and be at the top. But if you are not able to be at the top because maybe that is not your primary talent, so you are not able to perform that better than your other competitors. So you will lose motivation completely in the education system, and the education system will treat you as a failure and will discard you. And we see that happening with the bottom 50% of our class peers in since school and colleges. The bottom 50% gets discarded by the education system because they can be motivated because they are treated as failure. The way motivation is structured.
yes,
I think there could be a native motivation. The motivation is designed on the basis of curiosity and self-learning. Like maybe everyone gets treated based on what kind of passion or what kind of talent they have, or the motivation is built based on the different kinds of professions that children are introduced. Like these are different kind of professions. These are the spectrum of professions that you can pursue, and everyone can have their own intrinsic motivation to pursue a profession. It can be based on lifestyles. Like these are different kinds of lifestyles that exist that people follow in our society. So children can build intrinsic motivation to pursue their own individual. They can develop own intrinsic motivation to a certain lifestyle. They can work. They can study accordingly. They can choose what to study, how to study accordingly. What the motivation structure that needs to be built in this discussion, and we agree with the current structure that we have based on the creative environment, and is there any alternative or not? So Joe's want to say something on this.
yes, yes. I mean, so there are a lot of shortfalls for this competitive environment because it only focuses on the winners and losers classification, right? So there are a lot of people who are left out of the opportunity. It's also necessary when it comes to limited jobs that we have. But what I would say is to limit these kind of competitive thinking into the jobs, the government PEC exams, and provide a more collaborative and group-based learning in schools, right? Ultimately, what we want the students to be is to help one another and create a better version of society that we have right now. So if we want the students to be or people to be like that, we have to educate them to be like that. Otherwise, if we are telling them to not help others, not do the thing like we will call it like during an exam if someone is asking for help and so like that is not possible, right? So exams in itself is something that is not an enabling thing for people to collaborate. That's a very exclusive mode of assessing students. That is also important, but apart from exams, we should provide an avenue where students can collaborate and come up with solutions and something like that should be there. Otherwise, the I don't know like whether it will play out in the future because as we mentioned multiple times, information is available everywhere. How to use it is the challenge. So we are facing a lot of issues like the climate change. Competitive mind cannot solve climate change issue. Like cooperative mind can only solve the issue of climate change. People have to come together. They have to sit and talk. If you are thinking in terms of like I need to be the winner of this, I need to be the uh, person who is at the helm of this, then I mean that is why that's how it's happening. But we need accommodative spaces to get over this challenge that we are facing. So in an era like this, we need collaborative learning. We need space for people to discuss and to come up with solutions. So that is my way of thinking on this issue.
Rahul, you want to add?
Yeah, so currently the motivation of any student, if you are seeing, so it will come how I will have to perform an exam. Right. Correct. So there is no second incentive that the student is getting. Or so what if we design the assessment in such a way that there are other things also that student can do and it has some weightage like we have in ISP, right? So the exam is not the only thing that is currently counted for. There are other things that has a weightage and you also get a motivation to do that. You also have an incentive to do other things. For example, if you are part of a group discussion and you also understand that you will be getting some incentive if you are part of this, if you're doing that. So this either some way or the other in such incentives will always trigger that motivation factor from amongst the student, and then all obviously you can add some other incentives attached to it, and similar goes with the teacher's part. So currently the teacher had to do a lot of things, other things than only the teaching part of the students. They have to be part of the when elections are there, they have to be part. So any government circulars come, they have to be part of the same. So what is the other incentive? So what is the incentive that the teacher is getting to improve the efforts of the students? So there has to be an attached incentive that the teacher is also getting that improves his or her motivation as well. So assessment how we are assessing the student life cycle, the teacher's life cycle is very important.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, life cycle based assessment will solve both sides, the student side and teacher side, because teachers will also be judged based on these performance of these assessments. And I think I agree that building in a holistic kind of report that not only assesses your knowledge but also maybe assesses your how able you are socially, how able you are physically, how able you are culturally, and how much you collaborate among others, how much you have the kind of leadership attitude. So all kinds of aptitudes we should be measured. Should be built. Holistic report card. Also, holistic report card. Besides building a holistic report card, I think what you said Rahul, about a life cycle of a student. So, like how these skills are progressing. I mean, throughout the an academic year. So, transitive report card that develops keeps developing. So, a continuous assessment of a holistic report card will also assess their lifestyle of learning and or lifestyle of the development of the children. I agree on both the things, but when even if we measure, even if we improve the assessment, even if we start measuring all the kind of skills and aspects of aptitudes, this will still be a competitive environment. I mean, at the end, the environment rules they will be playing on will be competitive because they will want to improve their sports and other peers on each of these skills that is being measured. At the end, it will still be collaborative. It will still be competitive. I think what Joe's in one point that we should also build a corrective aptitude. Like we cannot solve air pollution without being having a corrective aptitude. If you are only have self interest and interest to do better than others, to earn more than others, so we need to build a thick kind of aptitudes also in children. And there should be assessment to measure that also. That the more you collaborate with others, the more you do something, for the betterment of your peers, the more you get scored well. Uh, and that thing is also be developed. And I think the way the what I talked what about cycle of students. So there should be this kind of a report that is that measures individual progress and should be only accessible to the students itself. Other students should not be able to see this individual progress of other students. I mean, there is no need for this information to be available to all the students because there should be a motivation that needs to be developed that each individual needs to compare themselves to their past self and not to their other peers. So motivation to improve their own, get out of their own weakness and make their skills stronger themselves, comparing their past experiences not with the peers. These if these reports are available only to these individuals, they will not compare. They will not be able to compare with other students. They will only compare that they have progressed themselves. This kind of attitude, I think, should also need to be there. So we talked about exposure, we touched agency in some aspect also, but let's talk about agency a little more. So, there were when you read about history of pedagogy, you will find different opinions and these Montessori's and remember another kind of school system that were developed in old England. The basis of it was to have the keep the agency of what the children want to read and how they want to read or how they want to be educated, what they want to learn. The agency should be with the children themselves, so they decide what kind of classes they want to have, subject they want to learn, how they want to schedule it. So these agencies were given to the children decide among groups or however they want to choose. They choose all classes were optional, no classes were mandatory. They had to choose which classes they want to do, how they want to do. The system, this Montessori school system was originated in that way only. Later it evolved and developed into a different form. Originally it started that way. So we can talk about emergency. I mean, I don't think that is a practical way to do it to, let the children decide everything because we know it's not very much feasible. What the point of, a lot of functions that we do in the schools, they will be, purposeless. But I think what is my opinion on that is that the way we have clubs in our colleges. I mean, there should be, we do have like color-wise clubs, but it is only primarily for sports competitions. At least that is how it was in my school. Sports competitions and some level quizzes, but it was not for discussions. Like there was no club on philosophy. There is no club for discussing. There is no club. No, there should be, and I think clubs do in part keep the agency at some level with the students because students in the group they decide what they want to do and all. So there is an agency. There is an aspect of agency is given to children when they have clubs do activities in those clubs. But I was also thinking like having a mandatory 0 hour kind of class that uh, if we have 8 classes in a day, in a school, maybe reduce it to 7 and keep the one class free and let the children decide what they want to do. Give them a space, that extra space in the school that give them agency like to do whatever they want to do if they want to learn something and give them some directions, give them some structure that they can experiment with the time. The only aspect they are experimenting is the time. Maybe there is also infrastructure that they can experiment with, but that will develop, maybe that will also develop collaboration leadership among themselves. What do you guys think, side? How do we impart more agency? What kind of I have on this topic? How do you want to say?
So I guess it's a nice thing if we are giving some free time for the student. But at the very this is good when they actually understand what the topics or subjects are and what will be useful for them. So at the very when considering the schooling that our system has, giving this kind of exposure at a very starting point, I don't think this will be a good option because uh, we as we grow up then we understand कि अच्छा वो हमने इसलिए सीखा था, right? So so there has to be some basic knowledge first the student should embark on, and once they understand that, once they are into that कि हमें क्या vocational subject सीखना है, so then this idea is good.
Yeah, I agree. Jose, you want to add something?
I mean, but I have a very different take. But what Rahul said is correct only because uh, I never used to think of like things that I used to do in school is because of that. Because of this, I never used to seek on why did I do that. So, being said that, I think like we can inculcate the aspect of agency in education. Uh, just we have this parent teachers association in school, so including one student representative from a particular class or a school leader who has been selected by the students, all the students in the school, is one thing we can do to give a voice to students, right? We are talking about democracy, why can't we bring this thing in the school, which will make the process much more understandable for the students. They'll be practicing that as well. They won't know like the importance of it, but they will understand the reason why they have done it later on. And after that, I also think that, as you said, like one period for students for choosing the activities they need. It is also an important thing. But I think, like Rahul said, I mean, in middle school, it can be introduced. In primary, I don't know. I don't think whether students will have the ability to think like that and choose things consciously. But it's a good idea in middle schools. It can be implemented because we need to keep something flexible for students to learn, right? They will have interest even in middle schools. So like likewise they can explore it. That's my take on.
Yeah, I understand you where you guys are coming from, that we do not have any idea when we are growing up, when we are studying, that what we need to study. But I think that is the thing that becomes a problem. Like at the end of the 12th, we do not know that what I want to pursue, what are my passions, or what are my strengths and weaknesses. So you choose the engineering or anything that your parents tell, or that your society tell that this is the way to go. So I agree, but my point was that to enable experimentation, that will also enable self-exploration, and maybe a lot of things that you will do will go waste. At least the experimentation aspect, that maybe you will try different kind of things, and you will know what is your strength, what is your weakness, or what is your passion. Uh, I mean, there should be some directions, like how do you use your time, and but I agree what Jones also said, what also agree on that. So at the end, I want to touch on this one point on use of digital tools, and that is being done in a very school education system by the government, that using the tablet based education, and video based learning, that teachers use those tablets. There is for that to children, because my father is a government teacher in our school, so I know what how it is. So that is how it is done. Like there is a lot of there is a guidance that how to use those tablets, and there is a lot of video lessons that I have to develop. But I had one issue with that, that when these video lessons are being developed by a central agency, like there is if it is being developed by the center, then that's big problem. But when it is being developed by the state agencies, it will have video lessons will be one. Now the content, the example that is given in the the content the video lessons are based on will not be have relevance to local context that the child is going in. So there is a lot of plus of using these digital tools and video lessons in teaching practices. I think at level when teachers will start relying on these tools, it will lose some kind of context, relevance. So how do you think that we should integrate these digital tools in teaching practice? And what can be more done? And also, is there any space for adaptive learning, or tools that enable adaptive learning, or individualistic assessment? I just want to ask that how can we what kind of digital tools integrate to the teaching practices?
Yeah, I'm currently working on a project, like I said, right? So it's basically is focused on adaptive learning, where we will give students feedback on their performance. Ideally, we should also giving, I mean, them the information about the student performance to the teacher so that the intervention can be more robust. That is something that we are planning as a next step. And I think what you said about the contextualization of video lessons, words, phrases, it's also something that we have done. So what we have done is that we have developed it within the context of Tamil Nadu. We have selected the teachers who are aware about digital learning and who are teaching English particularly from class 6 to 8 where the intervention is happening. And they have been creating the content, and there is an partner, external partners, who is developing the video lesson, the pronunciation based on Tamil Nadu context or Indian context to be specific. So there are AI which will convert the English phrases, adwords, and videos into Indian pronunciation. So it is there, like Indian version of these things are coming up. We can leverage on these technologies to create a more contextualized content. I think this is happening, and it is also going to get a lot of traction when we are going ahead, and it will be used in many spaces as well. That's what I think.
Yeah, so I am a great supporter of using technology in education. Myself, I've worked in edtech for more than 4.5 years. Because technology can be scalable and it can be changed by a small intervention, and that small intervention can show a huge result. That is why technology is so impactful when it comes to education. You take how one video once made for training a teacher, it can train n number of teachers. So this is how teachers can be impacted using the digital tool. Second is how the teachers are teaching in the class. If there is a smart board and if that teacher wants to explain one concept with an example, so directly using that um, digital board, they can multiply the examples in which they can show it to the student. Now, third part comes about the student. When the student is learning, so it becomes boring at times just to read. Adaptive learning is something that can be very personalized, and that can assess the student, and that can then him over as to what is the level that he has gained from that subject. There are gamifications of learning, puzzles that can be introduced in many parts. For example, if a small kid, if they want to learn math, so how two, three birds are coming together with four, five monkeys, and what is the number that they have here? So that is something that they can be learned. So gamification is something that is very important. And so I also wrote a post before few days, which was based on education kiosk. So there are a lot of kiosks if you go to the airport, or so a kiosk is made, so those students where they cannot afford it, maybe an agency can be, the funds can be used to set up a kiosk in a village. So they can learn while they are not in the school as well. A lot of, I guess, organizations are working on helping the students learn at home as well. Uh, with the help of these digital tools, digital apps are there, so they are giving access to parents the application, and they are just monitoring how the students are performing when they're away from the school as well. Yes, digital tools are very important in terms of if you want to accelerate the pace at which we want to see the result, and also to give to the students what actually the current things are. For example, you can't go to every school and tell, hey, this is the one thing that you come. Now, if we get a mail, we all get a mail regarding that some changes that are made in the system. So the students are also getting aligned to use of digital phones, you can say, or smartphones, you can say. But what tools are we giving in that digital ecosystem are very important. So yes, I am a great supporter of that, and this as it impacts on a larger scale. That is why it's very important.
Rahul, I just wanted to understand that point more. You talked about something chaos and airport based. He did not complete understand.
So digital kiosk, like once you go to an airport, you see there is a digital board where you go to the digital board, you just log in to the structure and you play with it. You can print out the boarding pass, you can see when the flights are coming. So similarly, a digital kiosk is something it's kind of a digital board. So there, even if a person enters his roll number of the school and the school. So he understand that yes, I am learning in fifth standard. I have this syllabus. So on that digital kiosk board, you can input many kind of learning activities which the student can just go as a playing activity. So what this does is it also helps the student to move away from just the learning part to learn in a playing environment. So it's kind of so whenever so I have a daughter, so she's 2 years old. So whenever while she goes at the airport, so there is a kiosk, a digital kiosk where you can order the lace packet, you can order something. So she was just playing in and around that. They see the numbers, they see pictures, and even if you press something, then something different will occur. So visualizing something that you see in books or something, that is something that this digital or such digital boards can do.
Yeah, great, because I'm hearing about this first time. I mean, I have known about this digital was, but I'm hearing about that term first. And do you know that agencies or organizations that are developing technology?
Currently, digital kiosk is not something that they are. So I was in a tech company where we partnered government of Punjab. So we wanted to embark on competitive examination courses to them and with some skill-based education to them. But COVID time started, we were not able to do it on an offline mode. So we did not want to end the partnership. So what we did is we set up a room in the district commissioner's office, and we set up 30 different tablets with inbuilt skill development courses as well as some video series. What the aspect was that learning should continue, access should continue. So we had around 30 tablets which were installed in the room, and we gave access to around 500 people. So 500 people came, they registered them. So whenever these people had time, they would come, they'll just log in and they'll just go through. They can use the digital board for whatever reason they want, and they can skill themselves, they can learn from the videos, and they can get this way. So from a smaller way, you can impact a larger section and you can see the impact.
Yeah, I mean, it also sounds like a miniature form of, lab, digital lab, because you can do a lot of things play with it, and it does not require much space, and it can be provided to individuals also. It is a good. And we talked about adaptive learning at the last session of this discussion that we had it with many seniors from NSIT, and he and his friends and brother he has developed something, a technology-based solution for adaptive learning, and we will providing that tools. So like, there is a lot of being done actually
Yes.
in this issue. So they would just expand the width of the exposure that we have had. But I think because it develops new neural connections inside the mind, and it expands your perspective and thinking, and it motivates you, to be curious and work on kind of this curiosity to read and have more knowledge. Yeah, I mean, if develop curiosity among the children, and if they derive kind of joy from fulfilling their curiosity, then they become lifelong learner. They will be curious in their life and wanting to learn and to see different kind of things in life, different kind of experiences. When you guys were talking, also thought about that in this digital era, when there are digital identities, children will get their hands on a phone very early on. They will develop their social media accounts, and from there, echo chambers will start to develop. They will start seeing some kind of videos, and maybe from 11 age of 11 only, they will start seeing only one particular type of video, because echo chamber will start be there soon as their digital identity develops, digital identity of social media account is created. So exposure will be start, become more limited as social media.
Yes, yes.
Think it is more crucial than before to consciously expose others to different kind of perspectives and thoughts. And it is also important for the moral development because we were talking about in the last session on social networks and social media that social media tries to force you to a certain kind of moral code. But moral can be very subjective and it needs to be decided on an individual level. So there is an echo chamber, there is a lot of immersion into social media. Maybe moral development will create a herd mentality. There will not be a scope for moral development among children. They are too much immersed in social media and all. It will also lead to a more natural form, natural course of moral development. I think we are discussing about it. So that's, yeah.